Hi, I'm Dr. Bonnie Nish, Executive Director of Word Vancouver. I want to welcome you to our first ever Hybrid Festival. We're thrilled this year to be back in person after 2 long years of being online. We're hopeful that you're going to find the diverse programming that we've set out for you be something that you can find something of enjoyment, something that will educate you, something you can have fun with, bring your family to, bring a book to, and wander around and meet all kinds of authors. We want to also take a moment to thank all those sponsors who make this possible every year. The Canada Arts Council, Canada Book Fund, Canada Periodical Fund, Canada Heritage Fund, BC Gaming, Joseph Hawke's Foundation, the Hamver Foundation, DVBIA, and so many more. We also want to thank Penguin Random House for coming on board to make sure that we could have ASL interpreters on site this year as well. Please stop by, bring a book, find a book, say hello, and enjoy the day.
Hi there, my name is Dave Seaweed, and I'm the Indigenous Coordinator at Douglas College. I am from the Kwakiutl Nation, born and raised in East Vancouver. My father and his father before him are from Port Hardy in Alert Bay. I would like to acknowledge that I'm sharing with you today on the Kakite First Nation, which is the newest Minster band, and thank Chief Rhonda Larrabee for supporting our work at Douglas College. As is my understanding, the Word Vancouver Festival spread throughout the Lower Mainland and Fraser Valley and online throughout North America and beyond. I would also acknowledge the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Kwantlen, Katzie, and Coquitlam nations. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, where we live, we learn, we play, and we do our work. 95% of British Columbia, including Vancouver, is on unceded traditional First Nations territory. Unceded means that First Nations people never ceded or legally signed away their lands or gave them away to the Crown or to Canada. I have been asked why we acknowledge First Nations territory. Many organizations, governments, and school districts have adopted the practice of acknowledging traditional territories as a way to honor and show respect to the Aboriginal inhabitants of this land, the First Peoples. This practice enables wider municipal communities to share in Aboriginal cultures and leads to better relationships and understandings. Observing this practice connects participants with the traditional territory and provides a welcoming atmosphere to the land where people are gathering. We believe that acknowledging territory is a positive step towards reconciliation, which involves a commitment to learning about and understanding the real history of Canada's Aboriginal peoples and taking responsibility for reconciliation with Aboriginal peoples in Canada. The process of reconciliation is tied to the federal government's relationship with Indigenous peoples. The term has come to describe attempts made by individuals and institutions to raise awareness about colonization and its ongoing effects on Indigenous peoples. I would encourage you all, young and old, to do a little research about where you live, work, or go to school, and in turn, find out what First Nations territory you are on, so you can acknowledge when asked or for sharing at events. I wanted to conclude by mentioning the September 30th national holiday that began last year as National Day for Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th. In First Nations communities, we have been honoring Orange Shirt Day since 2013. The origins for the day come from a story about Phyllis Webstad's experience. She went to the mission for one school year in 73 and 74. She had just turned 6 years old and lived with her grandmother on the Dog Creek Reserve. They never had very much money, but somehow her grandmother managed to buy her a new outfit to go to the mission school. She remembers going to the store, picking out a shiny orange shirt. It had string laced up in front and was so bright and exciting, just like she felt to be going on to school. When she got to the mission, they took away her clothes, including the orange shirt. She never wore it again. She didn't understand why they wouldn't give it back to her. The color orange has always reminded her of that and how her feelings didn't matter, how no one cared, and how she felt like she was worth nothing. All of the little children were crying and nobody cared. We now wear orange shirts that always say, "Every child matters." I would encourage you all to wear orange shirts on September 30th and become an ally and partner for First Nations folks dealing with the residential school findings. I'm wishing you all the best during your time with Word Vancouver 2022. Stay strong and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm here with Avery, the editor, social media chair. We are your host today for Dueling Editors Live. Also with us, we will have Stu McDonald, the author of the piece, will be editing. And maybe you want to say something about that, Tara.
Hi, I'm Tara Avery. So I'm here with Kyle Hawke, and as he said, we're the co-chairs of the social media and communications for Editors BC. Today we're going to be looking at a piece by Stu McDonald, as he said. Kyle and I have decided to not look at the piece beforehand, so you're getting this you're getting this live and unfiltered. And so I guess without further ado, we'll bring Stu up maybe to tell us a little bit about his piece, and then we'll get into it.
Hi there.
Hi, Stu.
Let's see. What can I tell you? I started this a few years ago when we were visiting my wife's family in Finland, and as I got to know them better, and and learned more about the history of the Finnish-Russian enmity, I came up with the idea for, well, I don't want to spoil it for you, but a goofy fish out of water buddy cop idea. So I'll leave it at that and see what you think.
Sounds good. Also, you're very brave being here, getting edited live. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm in Barcelona, so
that's right. You may never come back if it's terrible.
I'm not coming home. No.
All right. Thanks so much.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
You're still muted, Kyle. You're good. You're good.
Okay, the piece is called Bear Hunt. And through the event, we will be sharing Tara's screen and mine to show how we truly in editing it. But we will be Stu as we go. So the first step, we will have track on, so our changes will be visible. I'm going to just scroll and any start here. Just
a second. Yeah. How about you're getting a very weird reverb echo happening that sounds like a stutter. So I will start by bringing up my screen share of the piece. So how about I read the first couple of pages here and our first section here, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. So the piece is called Bear Hunt. Valtra. Black and white birch trees, sky the color of a Baltic Sea storm. The temperature is cool, 5 degrees Celsius. The wind suggests a new ice age is at hand, September in Finland. A tractor in profile, metallic red and jet black, aerodynamic, like something you'd see tilling the soil on Mars. It chugs along at a moderate walking pace, harvesting grain in GPS straight rows, up and down, up and down. Though the tractor is perfectly capable of operating autonomously, there is a driver at the controls. His head leans back on the headrest, bobbing in time to something. Maybe the vibrations, maybe the roaring folk metal. It sounds like Korpiklani. That could have been terribly mispronounced, I don't know. Leaking out of the less soundproof than advertised cabin. Or perhaps he's sleeping. He might as well. This is Valtra's latest model. The driver has become superfluous.
Okay, hopefully my sound is better now.
It is.
It is. Yes, I'm going to say the first thing there we should address is basically sentence fragments, because there are authors who aren't sure when they're okay, if they're okay, etc. And I guess there's generally the fear that, oh, this isn't a sentence my editor is going to. But here they're used really effectively. I'm just going to make a point. Black and white birch trees. Stu, you've got that in all caps. Generally, you wouldn't do that in a manuscript. All caps doesn't really work in manuscripts, generally because it doesn't give the designer the options to treat it. But that's minor. But sky the color of a Baltic Sea storm. That's not just a fragment. That's almost it's almost a poetic line, and I really like the way this evokes what we're seeing and feeling. The temperature being cool, 5 degrees Celsius. I would suggest that's the first thing I think is a potential issue. Cool sounds a little soft when we're going to the suggestion of a new ice age. Tara?
Will. You need to mute. There we go. This keeps us talking over each other, though. That's very good. Yeah. So Kyle mentioned sentence fragments. Personally, I love a well-used sentence fragment, and these are really great for the same reasons that Kyle mentioned. They're the sort of poetic opening of this is setting a certain kind of tone and a certain kind of scene. Given that we don't know much about, as this is our first read, I don't know how it's going to carry on, but I will say that I would expect something of this tone and this kind of poetic sensibility to carry through the story, since that's how it's opening. So you're essentially establishing something for the reader. They're going to expect this, to carry on throughout. Obviously not, necessarily related to just using a lot of sentence fragments, but this kind of poetic, almost visceral imagery type writing, I would expect to carry on. And if it suddenly changed, then I would have questions about the opening. But for now, I don't. I really love the wind suggests a new ice age at hand. I would say that, to me, 5 degrees Celsius isn't that cold. But if it's the wind chill, coming in, the temperature itself is 5 degrees, but the wind is promising that it's going to be way colder, that was the image that it gave me, less that the wind was representative of the 5 degrees Celsius. And I just think, at the end of this first paragraph, we know where we are. We don't know who we are yet, but we know where we are. We know something about the environment. We have a certain feeling about what it looks like, what it feels like. And then that September in Finland is just such a great, kind of push pin to tell you this is where we are. Okay, moving on. So I really like his opening. I think it's, barring the minor confusion between, ice ages and 5 degrees Celsius, I think it's solid. It's solid.
Okay, so continuing into the second paragraph, we've got more fragments, but I like the way it shifts from fragments, and then suddenly we're getting sentences with commas that flow into the more regular, where we're going sentences. And I like that flow. I also love the line, it chugs along at a moderate walking pace, harvesting grain in GPS straight rows. I love GPS straight rows. Of course, the GPS works that way for me. But other than that, we've got a very strong opening. We've got a very clear setting. So that leads us into the meat of the piece. the tractor being perfectly capable of operating autonomously, but there's still a driver at the controls. So the first introduction we have to this person is that they are superfluous, and of course the paragraph ends with that. Stu, I don't know if you're jump in at this point, but let's talk about Korpiklani, or and pronunciation of that as well.
You've got the pronunciation pretty close. Again, my wife's family, she has a lot of Finnish family, and they've introduced me to a fair amount of the culture, including the folk metal band Korpiklani.
Mm-hmm.
So I was listening to it. One of my nieces, who's not actually biologically related to my wife's Finnish family, on my sister's daughter, came with us, and she actually went back and attended a bunch of metal festivals with some of my wife's family. So she knows the stuff better than I do, but I learned some of it from her when she returned too. So just trying to get some authentic touches.
And that's exactly how it comes across to me. Is something, this is one of the, so all the time, writers endlessly hear the, show don't tell adage, and editors say it all the time. And I'm a writer and an editor, so I get it from both sides. But this is exactly what we mean when we're talking about, sort of showing something. You don't go into a long, over description of what this, roaring folk metal is. You name drop something. It's clear from the way it's spelled that it's something, Finnish. And it just, that feels real in a way that grounds the reader in, again, a time and a place and a culture, in a way that isn't telling us, oh, by the way, this is this, and this is how we met, and this is how he knows this music. And well, it gives a sense that this person, whoever he was, had a life before this story started that will continue on. He didn't come into existence just now. He has an existence beforehand. He's learned that he likes this music. He lives in this place. And you did it so well in this little, almost throwaway sentence, that really adds a lot of nuance to what's being set up here.
You two are extraordinarily sweet. Do I have to pay you money now? How does this work?
No, you get this one for free. Well, I mean, thank you. You have given. We should be complaining maybe that you didn't give us enough to be mean about. But
it's very nice of you. Thank you.
It's important to hear the good stuff too, isn't it? Because that's what you take forward going on. Anyways, Kyle is going to say something now, but without me.
I wanted to build off the show don't that come the Chekhov line. Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light in broken glass. And that's what we have here. Is we have the details that reflect the larger picture. That's what I like about it. That the roaring folk metal. We don't need to know what Korpiklani is. It gives us an idea that it's not something pure in this context, but that it's leaking out of the less soundproof than advert habit. So we've got so much in there. We've got the fact that in itself is filled with music. It's not exactly soundproof, so it is leaking out. But that's not to make this tractor is under. Gives us a lot. Let's move on a bit. So full sentences here. So the tractor end of the road, end of the front is visible. It's visible for a moment. There's a hole around the edge. There should not be a hole in the windscreen, ragged edges or otherwise. I would reconsider that repetition there. There's a hole ragged around M dash as being like the all-purpose tool that they are. That would be my first thought. there's a hole ragged around the edges, which should not be there. Even a comma would be. Thoughts on that?
I would agree. Um, just because there's in some cases repetition can serve a sort of it builds up the importance. And this is clearly like we're going to get an explanation about the whole, and the whole is going to be important. But I feel like you're playing the card almost a little too early, because right now you're still setting the scene for the reader. So the whole is important, and that's where the M dash that Kyle was mentioning would work, because an M dash sets a bit of information apart and makes it important. But I think you might want to save the repetition for a little further down, so that you can use it in a place that's going to have more of a sucker punch.
You'll see in a moment. There isn't much more. That's why it's there. But I very much appreciate what you both said. You're just gonna, go ahead. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Okay. My thinking here is looking further. The idea that there's a hole. We don't need to be told that the hole being ragged around the edges would make it okay. That's, I think, the issue there. And I'm thinking on it more. There's a hole ragged around the edges. There I do M dash, and it does, however, skipping that M dash ragged around the edges, M dash explaining the roaring out of the sound of the 7.
Right.
Because we're coming up to this heavy line here. So the drum continues to bump in time. He's not sleeping. The back window is splattered.
Nice. Super creepy.
Yeah. So the rep kind of gets on the whole, which the issue. The whole is detail. And here we're going to one thing that, from the distance that this is being viewed at, is effectively visually a detail until you spot it, and it tells so much. Any thoughts on the next paragraph, Tara?
Moving on from the blood. I just want to say something else actually about that paragraph, because in a way, okay, so you've got this, and this is going back a little further, right? So you're setting it up, the less than soundproof cabin, the music, the sleeping. Then in that next paragraph, in a sense, you are repeating something that we already know, something that we've already been introduced to, all of these same details. And I would say I'm not 100% sure that you need all of this after you've already established it so well with that preceding paragraph.
Okay.
Like the important part is, yes, the whole, and that, but there's something, it's kind of like, I think it's maybe this, it does, however, explain the folk metal roaring out of the soundproof cabin. That almost feels like an unnecessary over explanation of something.
Okay.
Like we know there's a hole, right? So yeah, obviously the hole is the reason why we'd be hearing something outside, so whereas the really, I almost said meaty, and that just seemed inappropriate. the meaty image is the one that comes on. So it's like, I guess I want to go from the whole to maybe then to the driver's head bobbing along with the music, but not so much time spent on that. That's very, like, this is very subjective. I just feel like it's maybe a little too much repetition of what we just experienced as the reader. So it might feel like, yeah, we know we were just here 1 second ago.
I mean, excellent observations, and I certainly, I'm not, I wouldn't bristle at the thought of that idea. I'm curious, at what point, if I did feel more strongly, would I make a case to an editor about, here's why I like it?
Oh, you can do that at any point.
Okay. I mean, if I really thought you were wrong, I would say that. But
absolutely. I mean, usually, I know that's a thing that I always say to authors that I work with. I'm like, the final word is yours. I'm going to offer my suggestions, and hopefully there's something useful in them. But you do not have to take them, especially when we're talking at this, like the style level right now. We're not talking about, this is where you're supposed to grammatically put a comma, like, nah. And even then you can argue with that, because plenty of authors do. But at any point, you can, what I would say then is that if this is what I, the reader, am picking up from what you've written, and it's not hitting me the way you, the author, intended it to hit, do you need to think about why that might be, or how to be more precise or more clear so that the imagery and the choices that you've made are hitting me the way you want them to hit a reader?
Right.
The way I often frame it is that the editor is the stand-in for the entire readership. So the entire idea is we might bring up something that this will be an issue or be a stumbling block for a few readers. You're willing to lose those readers. And that's what it comes down to. It's basically, you can say, well, I like this line, I like this progression as is. I'm willing to take a small hit for that. But if you're explaining what it is about the line, the progression, the dynamic, whatever, that you're particularly attached, we could possibly a way around whatever we see as an issue that still maintains. And sometimes it comes down to as something as simple as remove
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
I would say as well. We've got like Tara was saying, I basically agree that pull out the extra there, the important repetitive image. It just becomes a number of repeated images. But if it's the one image of the driver's heading repeating, that's going to stand out more.
Okay.
I like to punch that, and I do want to say, Stu, that both of us. I'm speaking for Tara. If I'm wrong, really like what you have here. So we are going to, and a good editor will do this. The better the work is, the more niggling things we will still be looking to better it. If you had piles of little grammatical errors, we'd be focused on that, and we wouldn't be so deep in little things like this.
Thank you.
Yeah, but so
I sort of think of that as, when the mechanics are pretty solid, as your mechanics are, then we have more of an option. We have more time and, more of an option to talk about style and to talk about craft, like the really, going beyond the surface level stuff, because, sometimes a piece, you only have so much time or money or any of those things. So, you can't always, you're paying somebody to use as much time as you can afford. And in a case where we're spending all our time, hunting down errant commas or something like that, it just uses up so much of the time that you've paid for. But yeah, so this is the fun stuff. Like, this is the stuff that I just love about being an editor, is when you get the opportunity to work on something that's mechanically sound, and just, then you get to really play with words.
Mechanically sound like a tractor.
Yes, exactly.
Very nice.
Well, this one does have a big hole in the window, so I know.
Yeah, but one, and also errant commas. So I want to point out one thing in this next paragraph before going deep into it. But the tractor, oblivious to the vagaries of human interaction, continues on with its programmed task. Hours later, this is done. The tractor itself and the driver is late. That his body is discovered. So they. First of all, we're establishing the first use of the Oxford comma. As an editor, we'd be making that note, possibly checking the rest of it to see if it's relevant. We can say this is the stamp for the book, or piece as it is. I would get rid of that comma after dinner.
Yep. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I love this line. The only thing is, I would have the opposite reaction here. Rather than pulling out the repetition here, I would want a few lines of that slow, pointless. Well, not pointless, slow harvesting. The tractor is doing it itself, really giving the idea of how long this is just being moved along forth by this tractor as being done. Because instead of just saying it's hours later, give us like long lines of not long text lines, but long lines across the field. Draw it out more, I think.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, I would probably suggest maybe even going back to the imagery that you used in the very beginning, you know, those GPS straight lines, and sort of, you know, when the field is, you know, has been reduced to lines, then the tractor is something that sort of implies the amount of time.
Right.
See, this is the show, don't tell. This is the tell. You're telling us it's hours later, but you could show us by choosing the right image or the right, you know, phrasing. You could show us how much time has passed in a way that feels more meaningful than just,
Okay.
you know, it was hours later.
And I think that image is right there. We've already given us the GPS straight line. So maybe the idea is that the field turns from like an underline to basically just flat and completely harvested, like that the entire thing is carved. Like if we get that, and to be honest, Ed, I would stand like a couple of sentences of it, of the just going back and forth, the shape of the field, of course, vertically, the shape of the field changing. Because I think that's really evocative. The field is being mowed down as it's being harvested, while the dead body is being moved across it.
After somebody else was mowed down, as
Nice.
it were.
Okay, so that was about 20 minutes for a page. A book's 300 pages. You two are employed for a long time, aren't you?
Yeah.
And this is why we can't, you know, do this level of deep dive on every piece that we get, or else, you know.
Oh, you'll be doing it for me. I'll be paying that kind of money.
Broke, and we would be desperate to, you know, be like, I spent 40 weeks on, you know,
this piece of crap.
30 pages. All right. So next. Oh gosh.
Yksi.
Okay.
It's the number one in Finnish.
Okay. I have to say I've been watching a lot of Finnish TV lately, but I feel that, like, of all the Scandinavian languages, which I can sort of get my brain around, Finnish is so different. I mean, it is a different root, but Finnish is so different that I'm like, I have no idea what these people are saying at any time. Subtitles, thank you. It is cool sounding, but yes, that's just letters to me. Yuski. And is it Luoma or?
Yeah, Luoma. That was my wife's maiden name.
Right, what you know.
Yeah.
Yuski. Detective Luoma If you could drag yourself away from your admirers for a moment, I'd like a word. My office. Elias nods once at the captain, smiles apologetically to 3 young women orbiting his desk, and excuses himself, saying, "Forgive me, my beauties, duty calls." A trio of heads swivel to watch him walk away. The handsome detective is a marked man. Do you want me to keep going, Kyle, or do you want to say anything about this? I really enjoy the imagery that you're creating here.
I want to win. I love the imagery. There's some things though. The captain, we wouldn't have capital letters on that. It's not.
That's why Word is mad right now.
So, yeah, basically, as an editor, we would at this point probably stop reading and look for every instance of captain and correct all the ones that should be lowercase. So, other than that sentence, Elias nods once at the captain, smiles apologetically to 3 young women orbiting his desk, excuses himself. I put a period there. We don't need saying. As well, the thing I find with saying the dialogue attribution in a long sentence like that, he's not saying, "Forgive me, my beauties, duty calls," while nodding once at the captain, smiling apologetically, and excusing himself. So it doesn't really fit there. So excuses himself, period, and the dialogue, that's fine. It doesn't need the tag there. We know it's Elias because the paragraph starts with his name. Other than that, it's the 3 young women orbiting his desk, but we've also got the captain. So a trio is unclear. I'd say the trio, to be clear, it's the 3 young women orbiting his desk.
You don't know, maybe one girl doesn't look and the captain does.
Yeah, that's the thing. We don't know which 3. If you say trio, it's pretty clearly a reference to the 3 young women.
Right.
That's the easy fix there. Other than that, I don't think we want to repeat the 3 young women again. But yeah, forgive me, my beauties, duty calls. I don't know the character well enough to say much there, but
I might raise a question here about perspective and point of view. Just because, clearly in the first section, we weren't following a person, we were following a tractor. So it was a farther, it was a more distant perspective. Here, I haven't read it enough yet to know if we're going for like a full omniscient, or if there's, if it's going to close in on Elias. But this is, the handsome detective is a marked man is something that's being observed from outside of Elias. So that, that's something that just a question that I would have that may very well be answered as we move on. But it just because that creates it's like, oh, this is an outside image, not unless, because Elias isn't going to be thinking of himself as either the handsome detective, maybe he is, or being a marked man. But I do love that line. So yeah. Kyle, do you have anything to say about that?
Yes, I'm actually kind of suddenly realizing we've gotten that first paragraph. Drag yourself away from your admirers. The 3 young women orbiting his desk in the second one, and then the handsome detective. We might be hitting that a bit too hard there. I do like that line, the handsome detective is a marked man. But handsome is kind of generic and it's already gotten across with the idea of the admirers orbiting his desk.
Yeah, I agree.
So maybe
it's been shown to us through the dialogue and the orbiting girls that he's an attractive person. So you could, whereas the handsome is telling us he's handsome.
Yep.
And I think you could say the detective is a marked man and it loses nothing. In fact, I think it's a stronger, because we've already we've already seen.
Get it
How?
out of there. Come on. What's it doing there? Thank you. What took so long?
I'm going to disagree with Tara there. I think I would like a different adjective there. I like the rhythm, the pace of it, just something more specific and handsome.
Yeah, that's actually something I should point out. As my adult livelihood has been as a bass player, sometimes rather than sense, it's the rhythm for me, right? So what you were saying there, Kyle, another adjective, even if it seems superfluous at times, it's what my ear hears over sense.
Absolutely.
Not always, but it's like, I don't like it anymore. It's clunky, right? I don't mind that, but that's a thing that, like, how early on in a relationship with an editor would I mention that? Was this a good time at the 30-minute mark?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I
actually think that you might even realize it earlier on, because editors and their potential authors have quite a lot of communication beforehand, right?
Right.
And at least for me, I know that a part of that process, a part of that back and forth with email and stuff like that is basically what boils down to finding out whether or not I'm a good fit for them, or they're a good fit for me. You know, like if somebody, you know, there are people out there who absolutely love, you know, the red pen and having their work torn to shreds and the kind of like drill sergeant attitude. There are authors who love that, and I'm not their editor, because I tend to be much more like, you know, nurturing and psychological.
I haven't been through this process enough to know, but I think gentler. Plus, I don't think I'm absolutely terrible, right? I don't think I'd have to be torn. Thank you. I don't think I'd have to be completely torn apart and eviscerated, but neither have I gotten any success so far. So I'm prepared to step out of the way and be wrong about that and go, no, you do need this torn apart more than you think you do, smart guy.
Yeah, I would say I like the idea of nurturing, but that said, I will do a check on the author's pain tolerance early on.
I'm a bass player. You can't make me cry.
Sometimes too, I think authors underestimate how much pain they can take. They think they can take all the pain, and then they see the page and they're like, nope, that was too much pain.
I'm sure that's true.
I'm going to suggest here, we were talking about a different adjective. I'm going to suggest we got the switch to the trio of heads. We've changed the focus. Call it the departing detective is a marked man. What do you think of that, Stu?
Not bad.
I also wonder whether or not the right adjective might be something that
adds a layer of depth, right?
Yeah, it reveals something we don't know.
Expecting, yeah.
So. Although I do like the double alliteration, Kyle, of departing detective and marked man. Okay. So we're going to put a...
I have to admit, weakness for alliteration, used well, but also in the process, well, for one, you know, we were talking about the amount of time it took to go through one page. This is basically, normally we're not explaining it. We're going at a much faster pace. But things like that, we would be noting. If something came to mind immediately, if we knew there was something that specific that we had to think about, we might do a little research to look up at some of the options in the thesaurus or something. But what we probably would do is just leave a note for the author.
Right.
Consider other things, and we would toss a few suggestions at you potentially, with the idea that you should be choosing what's the appropriate word there.
Right.
And it's something that would take more time than we're going to really use here at this moment.
Yeah.
Check.
But with that, we've got him stepping inside the captain's office. So again, we would do lowercase there. I do also want to note under that, visitors and underlings, 2 spaces. We would
Sorry about that. I'm pretty good about that, but missed that one.
They always happen.
How's that pronounced,
Arcala.
Arcala? He steps inside the captain's office. Captain Arcala is already seated behind a desk big enough to remind visitors and underlings alike who's who and what's what. The desk is almost completely uncluttered. A single folder lies on its surface, at an angle so meticulously casual, Elias knows it's for him. The captain nods at the door. Detective Luoma turns and closes it behind him, takes a seat, ignores the file. So, you seem to be settling in. Yes, sir. Your new place is good? Yes, sir. Very nice. And your coworkers, you appear to have made some friends already? I hope so, sir. So, well, I know that we're probably going to have things to say here, so let's, yeah.
First of all, I'd like to say, detective. Turns close to the body. We've already been introduced to him active now. Do we call him Detective Luoma throughout, or just Luoma?
Oops.
Here, I think Detective Luoma is going to get heavy.
That mostly just came out as a mumble.
Yeah, the audio is pretty garbled. It sounded like Finnish.
Yeah, sorry. Limitations on my end. I'm hoping this.
In English, please, Kyle. We don't all speak Finnish here.
Okay. Hopefully this is better.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking is that rather than, you're not going to be saying Detective Luoma at every mention of him throughout the book.
No.
So with that, I think we need to establish how he's being referred to here. It's already established he's a detective. Would we just be saying Luoma for the mentions?
Sure.
Mm-hmm. This comes back to the question of perspective again, right? Because sometimes he's Elias and sometimes he's Luoma, and those two create like different sense of distance from the character. And like something that I think usually how one thinks of oneself versus the captain probably thinks of him as Luoma, tends to be a very surname, detectives tend to be a surname type job. But does Elias himself think of himself as Luoma, or does he think of himself as Elias, right? And sometimes when you make a decision about those things, then it becomes a clue to your reader whose perspective you're following, because if it's, someone who always thinks of him as his last name, it's probably, his captain or his
perspective,
or something like that. Whereas if he's thinking about himself as, and if he's thinking about himself as Luoma, then he has, has he become his job? There's a whole bunch of questions that get raised based on.
Really good point. That should be Elias, if you don't mind. I change it to his first name. Yeah. Thank you.
Another alternative is we've got the perspective. The captain knocks at the door. The detective turns and closes it behind him.
Yeah. I like it better the way it is right now. Thank you.
I don't know if you need this I find this period when I was reading it, whereas earlier when I was reading the different fragments, they felt correct. This one made me stumble because I felt like, we're still talking about the folder. So I would probably just say, at an angle so meticulous, because I love that meticulous angle, casual type thing. That juxtaposition is really lovely, but I just don't think you need a period there. I don't think it needs to be I don't think it needs to be a fragment.
Right.
Kyle may feel differently.
I think you could actually get rid of the on its surface there. So a single folder lies at an angle so meticulously casual. A lie's no sense for him.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to know.
Yep.
Okay, and I also this here, the kind of elided and here I like quite a lot. This is one of my favorite. This sort of series of commas that ignores the and, instead of saying and ignores the file. That's just something that I really like personally. And in this case, to me, it almost gives a certain. It kind of tells me something about Elias almost like he's so nonchalant he doesn't even need the conjunction.
I'm going to get a shirt that says that.
Good. I want one too. Anything or should we move on to the dialogue?
I'll just quickly say it. In a list, skipping the conjunction, or it's called an ascendantine, it is completely grammatically acceptable to use as a literary device. Just have a reason. Here, it works. It gives us the idea that this is step business-like.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, if you have an and in a list, they could be happening simultaneously. This really sets it forward as 1, 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go to the dialogue.
Yeah, it's a lot like the Coen brothers at this point. The dialogue's just gripping.
Yeah. I stopped just before the punchline before, so
That happens.
particularly one couldn't help but notice among the female employees. I like personally that you aren't cluttering this with dialogue tags. I don't think they're necessary, especially because you've got the sirs in there that set up the difference in the hierarchy of power. So, like some people would be very tempted to add a bunch of said so-and-so, and,
Right.
I never lost track of who was speaking. So yeah, that's more, I just wanted to mention for anybody listening in, sometimes you can really get away with not using dialogue tags, especially in a two-handed conversation, where we're very aware of who the two people are, and the dialogue itself makes it clear who's speaking and their relationship to the other speaker.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about that line, and your coworkers. You appear to have made some friends already. Obviously, dialogue does not need to be grammatically correct, but the presentation of it really makes a difference into how we hear the speech. Here, I would suggest either period or an M dash, depending on whether the captain is and your coworkers. You appear friends already, or but yeah, the choice of punctuation there between your coworkers and you appear is really going to give us the cadence of captain's speech. The other thing I'll say here is we would sort of figure out here if we do coworkers without a hyphen. That's a standard through the book.
Right. Probably both things I wouldn't fight you on. Whatever the house rules were on presentation of that, and M dash versus whatever, colon or.
And some of that would be because usually, when in the very beginning stages of working with an editor working with an author, we would probably discuss which English are you using, because that'll determine a lot of different usage type things, spelling type things, and also similarly, Kyle mentioned before, are we using the Oxford comma or the serial comma or not? Are we using an M dash, or are we using a spaced N dash, which is what the British do more often?
Right.
So, and because in your very first line, you had color with a U, I believe. So that's telling me it's either Canadian or British. So, but you want to establish that right away so that you can either, correct the Americanisms that might slip in, or vice versa type thing. Like it's.
I've actually changed spellings in pieces as I've sent them out, depending on if it was going to a Canadian or American publication. So, yeah.
I tend to be a bit of a traitor English-wise, because I write in American English far more often than I write in Canadian English.
I grew up, I'm older than you, and it was still more British spellings when I was learning to spell. So I had to unlearn those to learn Americanisms.
Yeah. Yes. So, yeah, there we go. Here again, we run into. What's that, Kyle?
I said I was going to weigh on a couple of points that were made.
Oh, sure.
Unless my sound is horrible, in which case. You talked about M dash versus spaced M dashes. I want to make the point that spaced M dashes are becoming more and more are used more and more, because for ebooks, especially e-readers, often don't read M dashes properly if they aren't bracketed in spaces. So the end goal for the piece would figure into the decision for that, as well as the choice of the type of English. And I won't go into Canadian versus US versus British English, because we could go for hours and we don't have that much more time left.
We are actually kind of almost at time. We're very close here. But I do like the Mr. Spock reference, so I have to mention it, because that also creates a very clear image. And then I also really love it with the highly illogical sentence fragment after it. Like it's a nice detail.
Thank you.
Also, apparently he's a Star Trek nerd, so, Oh, Kyle's talking, but we can't hear him because he forgot to unmute himself.
Sorry, just that paragraph at the end there, the captain continues, but his dialogue is actually the next paragraph. That I'm not a fan of.
Okay.
If you're going to continue from that same paragraph.
Okay.
Focus is on him. But I do think we should probably wrap up. So I'm going back to exercise. Thank you so much, Stu, for participating in this.
You are most welcome.
George.
Thank you both.
In on behalf of Avery.
I will repeat what Kyle just said, which is, we thank you very much for being here on behalf of Editors BC. I can read his mind now. That's this is a great event. We had so much fun doing it last year, and I know we were both really looking forward to doing it again this year. And it's fun because, I think last year we cheated and we let ourselves read the piece beforehand, and this year we didn't. And I'm pleased that we didn't, because it's sort of neat to get that very first take. I mean, I can't speak for all editors, but for me, I can say that I don't usually dive into the actually making corrections until I've read something all the way through from beginning to end, especially if it's, at least getting a sense of the big picture before I start leaving notes and comments, because if it's going to be addressed, 10 pages later, then I'm wasting your time and mine. I really enjoyed. I'm looking forward to reading the rest of this on my own.
That's very nice. Thank you very much. I was going to actually ask you, would either of you be interested, if ever I finish this, in reading or anything else from me?
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Kyle says yes as well. He's nodding.
Nodding is good.
And he's talking, but we don't know what he's saying.
No one knows what he's saying. There you go. That's better. Oh,
No,
he's going again.
and he muted himself.
Basically, our tech guy and I are both working our mics. We keep undoing what each other does accidentally. So, but I was going to say, I did work with Stu's work before, briefly for a pencil session, and that's why I asked him to be part of this. So, yeah,
I was
would
very
love to
flattered
report
you
yours.
remembered me. Thank you.
That said, I think we are very much out of time. So I'm going to leave it to Tara to do the wrap up because I'm the one with the connection issues. So, but thank you for putting up with my phone and sound.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yep. Yeah. So thank you so much, and thank you to any of the faceless folks that are out there who watched us. Yeah, editing is fun. I mean, I think one of the things that sometimes people get scared of editors. They think we're out to, destroy their babies, and that's not really the case. I think a lot of times, I know when I had my sort of revelation that editing wasn't scary as a writer, it was like, oh, I can make this actually a better story than it was already. Oh, I just thought it was all about, red pen and massacre on the page. So it's nicer to know that it's, we're on your side, basically.
You were both very sweet, and now I'm going to cry myself to sleep. Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us all the way from Barcelona.
You're welcome. I am going to sleep. It's, I don't know what
Yes.
time here, 2 or 3 in the morning, something like that.
All right. Thank you so much for being here.
All right. Goodbye.